Good evening. At 7 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Karen, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Young.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Brink. Commissioner Kubal.
Here.
Commissioner Steeler.
Here.
And Chair Gerard.
Here. We ask you, if you're able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, I would like to take a minute and just thank Mike Keene for his service on the Planning Commission from 2015 to 2022. Mike sat at the end of the row there and always was a voice of reason and always had some interesting perspective. So on behalf of the Planning Commission, his dedication not only to the Planning Commission, but to the Fire Department and the Legion, I just wanted to publicly recognize his service to the city. So thank you.
And when I saw Linda at his celebration of life, she mentioned how much it meant to him to be on the Planning Commission and to be able to help with the future of Forest Lake.
You're good. And Abby, do you have an introduction you would like to start with tonight?
Sure, if you'd like. Tonight we have joining us our new city planner, Ken Roberts. I think I mentioned to the commission a couple different times that Ken would be joining us. He's been here, he reminded me, it's 4 weeks tomorrow. It feels, sometimes it feels like longer and sometimes I'm like, where did that time go? But Ken comes to us with a wealth of experience and tonight is here joining us and will be with us at our future meetings.
Very good. Welcome to City of Forest Lake.
Thank you.
The chair is looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented or with changes.
That motion. Second.
I have a motion and a second. There's not a discussion. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries unanimously. Chair is looking for approval for the Planning Commission meeting minutes from our September 28th, 2022 meeting.
A motion to approve. Oh,
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Aye. Next up is the Downtown Redevelopment Preliminary Concept Review. I believe, Abby, you're presenting.
I am, and if Karen would mind showing my screen here. So this is titled a Preliminary Concept Review. No official application has been submitted to the city, but in discussions with the developer, we thought that it would be good to get in front of our elected and appointed officials to gain some preliminary feedback on the concept design. Really, the intent tonight is to look at, on a very high level, what the commission is thinking about the development. From this meeting, the developer may or may not revise the plan, but also intends to move forward with discussions with the EDA and the city council, just to make sure that they don't get too far down the path of design and engineering, and then here after an application submittal from the city that we didn't know XYZ was going to happen or be a part of this proposal. This is maybe something that's new for the commission. Traditionally you're looking at something maybe when you've done this before. Great, awesome. It's so hard for me to know sometimes how we've been doing things, so I'm going to give just a really high level and then I'll introduce the development team and they're here to chat with you, answer any questions, really a workshop format tonight. So tonight before you do have a preliminary concept plan from Harris Associates and Gahn Companies to redevelop multiple parcels, an entire block of the downtown core. They would be looking to, and that's from Broadway East, and I think it's 2nd East. They'd be looking at two multi-use facilities. So on the north end, we would end up having a restaurant space, 122 residential units that would include enclosed parking. So we'd be looking at a parking structure where the units would be wrapped around that parking structure. And then on the south side, some retail space. I'm not sure if I mentioned that there'd be 122 units proposed. 22 of those would be facing Broadway, 61 along the west side of the property. We look at these sorts of things. First and foremost, this body should be looking at the conformance to the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan guides this as a downtown mixed use and does look for compact walkable mixed use. Both our comp plan and our downtown plan talk about the inclusion of more housing in the downtown area with a pretty high density. I think it might even be the most dense residential district in the city, with 20 to 30 units per acre. I will note that this is more density than that. And I don't think necessarily from a city's perspective that we are opposed to greater density. Things can always be more dense, but generally they shouldn't be less dense. As per our comp plan, not always by what the growing demands and pressures and feelings that we have sometimes about what goes along with the urban development. So the plan, when we talk about the downtown plan, it does identify this as a potential redevelopment site. So there is that block that we're looking at in the downtown plan. Downtown plan has some objectives to ensure zoning and design are appropriate. That we look at things from a spectrum of financial tools, and we use this downtown plan as a guiding document as we're coordinating with the developer. The development team has had a copy of the downtown plan. They have did talk some with the city and the city's downtown planner through the planning process. Additionally, the downtown plan calls for different directives, which would be including increasing parking capacity, coordinating with redevelopment on parking opportunities, maintaining viewshed to Lake One, creating new ways to integrate Lakeside Memorial into the whole development plan, and reconfiguring circulation. Generally speaking, the uses that are proposed are in conformance with the comp plan. It's just the comp plan sometimes get into those higher level objectives and goals that then we have to see how they balance out when future development occurs. With regard to the zoning code allows for these uses, and it is, the city really does desire and wants to encourage downtown living, which this would help support. The exception of the ground level walkout that are talked about on 61, there isn't anything that's in conflict with the zoning code. City is allowed, though, for first floor residential in the downtown, and it's something that the council or the commission may want to discuss tonight. Concept plan proposes setbacks from all streets. The code does really eliminate most setbacks for properties in the downtown core. One of the challenges with that is the yellow lines here on the plan really represent the property lines. If the development really extended its building shell all the way out, it would really maximize the footprint of the structure. The developer is building in these setbacks very specifically to help incorporate some green space, some buffering, to help accommodate then for that roadway design, pedestrian amenities. Additionally, there would be the space to allow for the city would retain a drive through the back and outdoor or surface level parking behind the buildings. The district requires a minimum of 2 stories, 25 feet, with a maximum of 4 stories, 45 feet. Not sure if I noted that the developer is proposing a 5-story building. However, 2 of those stories will be the lower or the parking associated with the development. In order to get the parking in on this site on site, the developer is proposing that wraparound design. Some of that parking may go subterranean, they haven't had enough detail to really know if the water table and soils will be able to accommodate that, which could bring that height down some. But that's what's being proposed right now. There would be some sort of rooftop terrace on that restaurant with the lake views, with views all around. All of that seems to be well consistent with the zoning code. With regard to parking, staff does go through the existing development demand, the parking area, the shortfall that we have for the existing businesses, what this would do in the vicinity, and not only in terms of this development, but future development or the existing development in terms of what parking is there, what would maybe need to be rearranged, and how much parking we would have. When it comes down to this, there would be a total of 130 spaces short for all of the uses in this area. That being said, the city zoning code doesn't require parking for commercial uses east of Centennial Street. So this whole area's commercial or non-residential use requirements are exempted. They are not required to meet the parking. As part of this development, we'll be talking with the developer of the reconfiguration of that roadway and the parking that would be along through here, whether or not that's a developer obligation or the city works in conjunction with the developer on our own project that would be done simultaneously. But when you add in the parking that could be designed through here, we actually would have a space shortfall of only about 20 to 51 spaces. And all of that really kind of just depends on number of units and the square footage is associated with future development. The parking, as I've noted, is significantly reduced. There are a little bit of challenges just in terms of city parking policy. The city doesn't allow for overnight parking in this area and what that could mean for residents of the building or guests of the building in terms of where they would park if there was a need for overnight parking not accommodated within the building. I do go through kind of a general findings. Overall, the city's code comprehensive plan supports mixed-use development. Overall, we want to see high-density residential development included in the downtown district. The inclusion of that restaurant space there that might be able to help preserve some of the views through the area, cleaning up the back of these properties, that roadway going back there, some of the parking, all of these opportunities are really beneficial to the community. Tonight, there isn't necessarily any sort of formal findings, no city formal recommendation. My recommendation to you is to hear from the development team, ask questions, provide some feedback, and we'll let the developer go and see if they want to keep moving forward with an official submittal or maybe revise their plan and come back before you with either another concept review or something formal. So I'm going to introduce Dan Eber with Gone Companies and John Harris of Harrison Associates and Hugh. And I forgot your last name, Hugh, if I didn't catch it already. He is also with Gone Companies.
I'm going to give you this because it's got a small presentation on there for Gone Companies.
Sure.
And then there's a little close-up there of some of the walk-up units. Should be only two things on.
Do we have one over there?
Jump
Okay.
drive.
Sure, we got a computer up over here, I guess. Oh, you've got your computer here.
I don't. Does this, I just open up what was up here.
Oh, can I plug in
So
right
is
here?
this- Sure.
I don't have an HDMI though, connection on my computer.
Oh, wait, there, I have one.
Yeah, we have one.
Oh,
So why don't you get yourself all hooked, figure out, get you figured out. Sorry, guys. I wish I would have known this, we could have done this.
Crushed.
Just saying.
Otherwise, there's a DG.
No, space. It has to go on.
Find it there? Did you find what you need? There you go.
And then I'll give it.
and then you can just touch those.
I don't think I touched this here. Yeah. Good evening, Planning Commission. Thank you for your time tonight.
Get you up on screen here first so everybody
Yep.
gets to see us. And if you could start by reintroducing yourself. She pointed to the general
Sure.
group here and I have no idea who's who.
Dan Hebert, Gone Companies.
John Harris with Harris Associates.
Hugh Gone with Gone Companies.
Thank you.
We good? So I thought maybe we could just recap some of the projects we've done in the past. We'll first look at Lighthouse Lofts. 2018, that was completed. And so I think what's important to note here is we did a similar we just call it a visioning session with Lighthouse Lofts, with Planning Commission and City Council back in 2017 with Aaron Parrish, if you recall. And we really valued the feedback from everyone in the community and the Planning Commission members and City Council. And so in some ways, we're doing that again here because we know that these are critical projects downtown, this is infrastructure. These are, some legacy properties here, and it drastically affects downtown and, the shape of the downtown. And so we value your comments here. And so when we developed the Lighthouse Lofts, that's a 103 unit apartment project, market rate. Back in 2018, it's mixed use, has Ballards, has Snap Fitness, and then Allstate Insurance. Combination of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. There's some walkouts that face the courtyard. That particular project, and there's the ongoing theme of parking, but that was 1.8 stalls per unit. And so that project was developed through PUD process. So, and if you have any questions while I'm presenting, just please ask, and I'll be happy to answer the questions. A couple other recent projects. One is in St. Paul. This was launched here. Pre-leasing efforts started in April 1st of this year. 89 units, just south of the new Allianz soccer stadium, and market rate apartments, and studios, 1s, 2s, alcoves. And then I would say the last like-kind project, this one here, be in Shakopee, Minnesota, right on the Minnesota River, right on a regional trail. And that's 170 units. And that was, those 170 units mixed use, that was on 1.6 acres. It's a combination of, there we go. And that was a combination of studios, alcoves, 1s and 2s.
I think one thing that's, that you can take a look here, the reason I blew this up, is you can see right along, this is actually Levy Drive. You can see the walk-up units. They're 2-story walk-up units right here. This is pretty much identical to what we're proposing along 61. We have a 2-story parking ramp behind these units. These units actually have access to the parking ramp, but it hides a 2-story concrete block wall. And it's referred to as a wrap project. And so the difference here is just that we're gonna have 3 stories above instead of 4. This ends up being a 6-story building here. But this, so we just wanted to show you that to give you a visual to put together with the concept plan that we did for Forest Lake.
So then if you take a look at,
Shrink that back down.
you can see a bit more clearly here. So the river's over here, the bike path is here, and then these 2-story column townhomes, but they're rentals, are here, and it's hiding the structured parking on that side. This is on a slope site, so the other site, which is the courtyard, doesn't have that. Let's see here. Okay. So you can see a little bit here. And then so if we were to go back to the site plan we're proposing for downtown Forest Lake, and as Abby mentioned, the townhome units on 61, it would be like kind of these here. So it would be, they would be hiding the parking garage. If you've ever driven on 61, White Bear Lake, there's an apartment complex there. It's escaped my mind, but that's the Boatworks. And they didn't do that, and so there's a concrete wall that you see on 61. And so we're trying to prevent the core downtown having a brick wall because structured parking is required. We don't know, like Abby said, we don't know how far we can go down. Historically, we've been here for a while, so we somewhat know water table issues and even a Lighthouse. We stepped up the site at Lighthouse and we still had some problems in the elevator pit, which is kind of below the underground parking, fully underground. So perhaps we can go half, maybe we go 6 feet under or something like that. So that it wouldn't be quite as high as, you know, parking on first floor and second floor. So, but this project we're proposing would have similar amenities, rooftop decks, structured parking, obviously, community rooms, things like that. So I guess right now, if we're happy to answer any questions that you may have, and we'll, I guess, put it in your court.
Commissioner Geneva?
Yeah, in the apartment units themselves, is there going to be any spots for any, like, social gatherings where if you wanted to have a graduation party for your child, there's going to be a room that you could use inside the building?
Yes, absolutely. And so I think part of the whole concept here is, and this is a new concept and this isn't a new approach, but so say you live in a 4-bedroom, 3,000 square foot house in Forest Lake, and you want to downsize. And so, or right size. And so instead of, you know, purchasing a smaller house, you purchase, or you come into a unit like this where you have, there's no taxes, there's no HOA, but then the amenities of the project fill in the gaps of the fitness room, they fill in the gaps of like gathering rooms. And so, yeah, there would be a community room that would be rented out, or a community room, just like Lighthouse is now. And that's how Lighthouse functions.
Then my concern actually is with parking seeming to be a little tight. If somebody were to have that kind of gathering, where would the space be for groups to park so they could attend such an event?
That's a great question. So being that it's a downtown urban site, if it's during the day, if it's on the weekends, like Abby mentioned, there's daytime uses and there's nighttime uses. And so depending upon what day it is and what time of day it is, the surface parking should accommodate those folks. And then also being that, you know, there's municipal parking to the north of the roundabout, the small little roundabout could accommodate those as well. So, I mean, there's going to be an ebb and flow of people for sure. And we would consider that visitor parking. And so if that visitor parking would be surface parking.
Okay, and then,
I should also mention that the preliminary unit mix on this are going to be and Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but approximately 60% studio, alcove, and 1-bedroom units, and then 40% 2-bedroom. There may be some 3-bedroom, but it's probably unlikely. So we think that at the ratio that we're proposing, whether it be 1.5 or 1.8 spaces per unit, that there should be plenty left over to accommodate visitors.
Kevin?
Interesting statement, John. I disagree, and that is my biggest concern with this whole project. Well, 2 things. One, hopefully those rooftop patios are going to be open to the public to come and dine and use and have great views. I'm hoping that's part of your consideration, but more importantly is when we look at parking, and originally I thought these were all going to be 1-bedrooms, but nobody has 1 car. Most people have 2, and most people don't live alone, but some do. So I don't see us anywhere close to having enough parking, especially when you incorporate the other businesses that are currently in the area that you already know are there. That's my biggest concern. I just don't see enough parking anywhere close to enough parking.
Well, this project here in Shakopee, which I think is a similar market. It's, you know, it's located about the same distance from the downtown core. We have 1.6 spaces per unit, and the way we did it there was to have 1.5 spaces for all the 1-bedrooms, studios, and alcoves, and then 2 spaces for the 2-bedrooms. And that seemed to work out really well. And there are a lot of people who do live alone, and there are couples who have 1 car. So even though that may not be the majority, we think there'll be enough there. And our experience has been that it's been proven out by the success of the projects, that we simply don't require 2 spaces per unit. That's 2 spaces per unit is, I'm not going to call it necessarily antiquated, but it's an older ratio.
Sure.
And nowadays the ratios have gone, way down. Of course, you can't compare it to St. Paul or Minneapolis.
I'm not
But-
questioning the residents so much. I'm questioning you have a restaurant potentially going in there, which is gonna bring in 100 cars. You have businesses right across the current, the road that we're not sure if the city's gonna own, if you're gonna own, if we're gonna put parking spots in, that currently use a bunch of parking spots, that, one of your offices is there. And that's my concern. How do we address all that parking?
So that's a great question. So a couple of comments there. One is I've worked for a company for almost 17 years and I go to that office every single day.
That's right.
I see it every single day. And when we had this discussion about Lighthouse, that it's always parking, really is. And so we contemplated a couple different ways. One is we're legacy owners, and so we're invested in the projects that we build. There are personal guarantees that are associated with these projects. There are banks associated with these projects, and so probably the most uneasy feeling is be underparked, because what can you do now? You've built it. And so we really stressed that and pushed that a little bit on Lighthouse, and people were kind of against it, actually, the 1.8, but we did it. And so something we talked about with Abby that I think would be a good exercise, and we'll do it again, but is to maybe do some car counting for Lighthouse. We have on-site managers there. We can do it, nighttime, daytime, weekend, holiday, and just do a fairly comprehensive, analysis on that. And I'm certainly willing to do it, because I somewhat did it before we did Shakopee, because sometimes you trust architects. Here, this is what happens over here, and you're like, really? And so you need to get data out there, not just from the architect, and not,
It's okay.
and not just from, we have to, right? And so we do other projects and talk to other architects and then talk to other developers. And so when we propose these things, again, we office, but I don't really want to go to my boss and say, gee, we underparked, and so you got to walk 3 blocks to work. What? And so these are great questions. This is why we're here tonight, is to talk about this, and to do some follow-up, to do some analysis, and to kind of prove things out and to make sure people feel comfortable. So I welcome that. We knew it was going to be brought up tonight, and we definitely want to talk about it more.
Yeah, I like the concept. I like the walk-ups. I love the
Abby?
green spaces.
go ahead.
I like all that stuff. My concern is the parking.
Yep. Okay.
Chair Gerard, if I may just state for the record, just a point of clarification, the city will continue to will own the road. It's just how that road is going to be actually physically reconstructed has yet to be determined.
Right. That could jeopardize parking spots.
Yep, I could.
Abby, I don't have the exact language, but maybe you could quote or paraphrase the 50% sharing parking.
I don't know it necessarily either, but in addition to the fact that commercial developments aren't required to meet parking downtown, there is also a provision in our code that allows for a 50% reduction of parking spaces when there's a daytime uses and nighttime uses. I don't know exactly how that applies to this development, but I do know that there are a combination of our parking standards that are definitely make it so that they may not necessarily need to meet all of their parking requirements on site. We're evaluating that. I would like to just remind the commission to try to keep the comments high level tonight. I don't want to get into necessarily of that 1.8 or 2 or 50%. I hear that there are parking concerns. I think that is a very valid concern.
My question, not related, I guess it's sort of related to parking. There's 56 First Street Southeast, which is your other building there. Why is that part of this development? The property is not part of this site back here. It's on its own entity. Why is that being included, and how does that affect the parking?
So staff brought that in as part of the downtown. We looked at the downtown in parking areas and parking quadrants. what the existing uses of all of the existing structures were and what their existing parking requirements were. And the reason that we did that is to really see what is the need in each of these quadrants, so that when we do get proposals, what is the need, what do we have, what is our existing shortfall? If we add this in, what would that cumulative impact be? The developer isn't proposing that other building being a part of this development at all. Staff's just used that as a total part of the parking analysis.
So that building needs 90, if I understand it correct, you're telling me it needs 94 spots. And they currently probably have about 20 or 25 actual, the row between them and Lone Oak, and then maybe a little bit behind it, and all the rest is public city-owned property, correct?
I mean, most back there's a lot of city-owned property back there, I would say. I mean, the 56 First Street is probably very underparked. I don't think that building meets any of its parking demand. But again, the city has a provision in place that non-residential uses don't have to provide for parking.
What's interesting, you have a current restaurant that's 24,000 square feet. We're not proposing a 24,000 square foot, event center restaurant, and the other, you have about 50 to 60,000 square feet right now of commercial use on that block. Most of it's vacant right now, for certain reasons, functionally obsolete. But let's just say we want to bring a medical use in there. We could build a 40,000 square foot facility and not have one structured parking stall that we have to accommodate. It could be all part of the 95. That probably would be a bad idea because they're both daytime uses. What seems to work is nighttime use restaurant and daytime use office. The Ron Salon, they're 8 o'clock or whatever, so that's a small retail component in all this.
Well, the residential in the code is actually labeled as a nighttime use. So the provision is for a daytime use to be able to use the parking provided by the nighttime use to allow you for a reduction.
Which is probably plays into the not having to meet your code for commercial, because there's daytime and nighttime uses there.
Susan?
You mentioned the 24,000 square foot restaurant that is there now. And the parking for that, when an entity such as any of the businesses around here, or even when the Rotary was trying to, the parking for that is all over behind Rio Rancho, on the other side of the roundabout, the little roundabout. And so, no, the parking is not sufficient at all. I think that I'm a little bit concerned with the studio and alcove and one bedroom. This city has had a very, very large number of studio and efficiency and one bedroom apartments built in the last 5 years. What the city housing needs are for 2 and 3 bedrooms. Trying to find a 2 and 3 bedroom apartment or townhouse that is not a home type is very, very difficult in Forest Lake. So if we are looking to have families here, if we are looking to have an elder couple that maybe wants to have their grandchildren visit once in a while after they have right-sized, I like that term, we don't have those kind of facilities. So looking at it on a very broader scale, I would like to see a different mix. We have like I said, we've had, and Abby and can probably tell us the number of that we've had recently. When I look at your plan here for Lake Street, one of the problems with the building on the northeast corner of Lake and Broadway is that those sidewalks are much too narrow to encourage pedestrian use, to encourage any kind of walkable feel for the community that was brought out very strongly in the downtown plan and in those community meetings. I'm a little bit concerned, just from the general plan here, how wide the sidewalk for public use along Lake Street is going to be, because we have said that we want our downtown to be much more walkable and inviting to pedestrians. And I'm not sure that peering into somebody's living room is the way that I want to feel walkable along Lake Street right now. So I have that concern. Later, I'd like to talk about the density, but our code says that you can go above density if you're looking at some affordable units. And so I would be interested to know, if you are going above our standard density, what those affordable units would be and what % AMI you would be looking at for affordability to achieve your additional density. On your building, if you're 5 stories, are you looking at 4 or 5 stories up?
3 on top of a 2-level parking ramp, which is unknown how high it's gonna be because of the water table, right?
Right, okay, so we'll call it 5 stories up. And if you have a rooftop, you're going to have structures, pergolas, yada, yada, yada. So you're essentially looking at a 6-story building. One of the things that we talked about in the downtown was not blocking our views and not blocking the perceived access to the lake. And so I'm wondering visually how that will work and what that will feel like, with essentially 2 large guardians as you come down Broadway toward the lake. And you sort of enter the tunnel. As we were talking about the downtown redevelopment, and we're looking at those downtown plans, that building on the northeast corner was perceived as a real barrier for folks, knowing that we have a lake in Forest Lake. One of the things that Abby brought forward was to ensure a spectrum of financial participation tools. At this early point, as you're looking at this, are you expecting the city to participate financially in this development? And if so, what would be the criteria or the reasons that you think that would be good for Forest Lake? So at some point, I'd like to know that. And I'll hold for right now.
Well, I'll take the easy one. If there is a way to get back to the original plan, if not, I can just describe it.
Yes, I can.
The intention of the pedestrian walkway, sidewalk along 61 is to be between 6 and 8 feet wide. I mean, that's a broad sidewalk, 8 feet wide, with a very substantial boulevard, and the houses would be set back. You can see there's quite a bit of green space there, so it wouldn't be the kind of thing where you're walking along a narrow sidewalk and someone's unit is right there.
Okay.
They're set back quite a ways.
That's helpful. Thank you.
That's really important to us because it's a busy corridor.
Yeah, and there would be similar, like a step up. There'd be maybe like a hanging balcony, so you have to step up to the unit. So it's not going to be street grade, I would
Maybe up
imagine.
a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit like 2nd Street and Lighthouse Lofts. We have walkouts there. So, but this would be, because that's an off street, not a 61, we'd make sure that there's, because remember, we have to lease these. And so people have to feel comfortable. So through the design process, we make sure that happens.
I have a quick question. Are you anticipating parking in the front on 61 there in the street, like over at Lighthouse Lofts, or is that going to be no parking in front there?
Well, it's a city street, so I would assume that,
State Highway.
or State Highway, that's a MnDOT call, I would imagine. We're not going to be in there, we're not going to play in their sandbox, so I'm not sure what but I mean, what's interesting about this is Lighthouse Lofts, when you're coming from the north south, folks are going 50 miles an hour as they get into Forest Lake. What's interesting about this site and this side of Forest Lake, they're already stopped because the roundabout's a little bit bottlenecked. And so you're not going to have zooming cars going through here, which is interesting. I mean, whenever I leave to go home, I have to use a roundabout because I cannot take a left out. And so we're not proposing to do any sort of changes to the small roundabout and cut off access in any ways. And we did have a preliminary discussion with MinDOT on this site, I don't know, probably 8, 9 months ago or so. And so that's probably worthy to say, but John, carry on if you have additional. Okay. So, and we have spent time with Bruce Chamberlain too, in all this. And the wide sidewalks, the vision of downtown Forest Lake and the backside, which would be the east side of this proposed project, and how that integrates with the lake and whatnot. And so a lot of great ideas. And so I'm trying to recall the other questions you had, Susan. And so I got a question for you, Abby. So if we went a PUD, would that, the inclusive, the affordability units still apply?
I'd have to look
Okay.
into that.
Right.
Planned unit development, you can request deviations from the code requirements. So,
Can request, but not necessarily have to be granted, correct?
but that is correct. I mean, you weigh out the pros and cons and the public benefit, and generally with a PUD, there is some sort of public benefit. The site isn't inherently eligible for a PUD just because of its size, and that there's a single building. So I think it would have to, there'd have to be significant public benefit to start kind of going down that route, but I'd have to look for sure.
Yeah, I mean, historically, we've been market rate builders and developers, and so that's just something that we haven't really thought through, and we have in a certain degree, but that requires a certain assistance of financial assistance, like tax credits, things like that. And so we can do it. We certainly know and understand that game. By and large, our gap financing, and this would be true for other communities, Shakopee, and we're working with the city of Osceola too, the village of Osceola on TIF. And so in a project like this, we do the but-for analysis commonly with the financial advisors of that particular city to see the viability of the project through the but-for analysis.
So let's go back to the walk-up units on the front. What's the opposition to retail along that strip?
Sure.
There's two reasons I asked this question. One, on the walk-ups, we're right at the heart of downtown there. I would expect commercial here. And even when you showed your Shakopee project, and when we look at Lighthouse Loft, the walk-up units are not on the main drag. We have it on the parking lot at Lighthouse Lofts and on, I believe that's Second. But in the front, it's all commercial except for, there's probably a fancy term now, the lobby of the apartment building. I don't know what they're called nowadays. but-
Sure. Well, actually, Shakopee Flats does have a row of townhomes on First Avenue, which would be similar to a Lake Street for car count per day.
So you have
We have
walk-ups
standalone-
on both sides of that building then?
We do.
Okay.
It's not shown
Show the
here.
other ones.
You can kind of see it. It's the white roof.
We can't see anything.
You can't see anything at all.
That's
That's
right.
right. What did I do?
There we go.
There we go. Right here, you can see the rooftops. And what the city of Shakopee wanted to do is they wanted to create more of an urban feel, and not, when you first see the property, you see a parking lot. You see nice row houses. And it's just as busy. It's busier because there's not the buffer of the roundabout that slows traffic down. And if you want better visuals, we can get you those too.
But why not retail?
That's a great question. So in general, we're not opposed to retail. We have a strong portfolio of retail, neighborhood retail around the metro. And so I'll put this nicely here, but there's a project to the north of this site that has struggled so deeply with retail that those units, because it's condoed, those retail units essentially went into foreclosure, were purchased for pennies on the dollar, and now sit partially vacant and partially occupied. But the barrier to here is If you can't park in 61, or if you can park the 5 or 6 stalls, no one's going to walk around a parking structure to go to retail. They're just not going to do it. You're not going to do it, and I'm not going to do it. It's proven out. It's human nature. So we would hope that the retail could come through a different way, maybe across the street, versus in an integrated fashion. It's just, we don't see the viability of it. Downtown, we see the viability of it other places in Forest Lake, and we know users that want to be here that are not here now, but they simply won't go here.
One of the challenges of Forest Lake is that we are a non-transit, non-Lyft, non-Uber, non-bike, non-Lime, the rental scooter bikey things.
The birds?
Yeah, Bird, well, Lime is one and Bird is in Minneapolis, and yeah. That is not this community. Transit was essentially taken away from the headwaters area. I do not see any kind of communal transportation in the city. We can't even keep a couple of Lyft drivers. So if, as we did in the downtown plan, we want to have more retail, we want to have more commercial, because residential dwelling units cost the city more than we recover in property taxes. We're trying to get more commercial, we're trying to get more retail, we're trying to get more of the industrial. Saying we're not going to do retail in this potentially prime retail location is a little frustrating. Part of the reason that the city invested with Washington County in the downtown plan is to say, okay, how can we help reinvigorate our retail? How can we help reinvigorate some of our commercial? And that's where the city is looking to make investments to make it more attractive for folks to come in and shop here. So I agree that I think from the city's perspective and from the city's desire to improve the downtown area, the synergy of retail would be very important. And I guess I've never thought of Forest Lake as an urban city. It'll be interesting to see in the next 4 or 5 years as we have changing elected official structures, how whether that is the vision that folks have for Forest Lake, is that we're an urban city. But that really exacerbates the parking problem. And when people come to a restaurant here, if it's 2 couples meeting, there's either 2 or 3 cars involved in going to the restaurant. So, well, I'm trying to figure out how this fits in Forest Lake, how this fits in what we were hoping for the downtown.
So
I'm looking for the fit.
So we see this part, this is only a piece of the puzzle. This isn't the whole story here. This is a part of it, like Lighthouse is part of it, this is part of it, and other future development in Forest Lake. And I would say that your highest tax value is high density residential. Creates the highest tax revenue you can ever have, it's density. So that's one thing, it does. And the other thing too is, remember, you mentioned Lone Oak and the restaurant, it's not gonna be 24,000 square feet. So we're not anticipating, a huge groups of 200 or 300 people. I mean, understand that there's 2 large group rooms that could be hosted of 2 wedding parties at once. And so that's just not the case here. It's not going to be the case in this new development. It's kind of economically not feasible to just, no one wants to pay for a big, call it 15,000 square foot space just to host events on. Because you're downtown in the dense, and it's hard to do extra parking, it's hard to pay for the space when it's not continuously used. And so as far as like the the retail component, and I'm happy to go down and walk it with you, Susan. You've been down there many times, but it's just, retail is, you can be on the wrong side of the road and have 80,000 cars a day and still not be successful as a retailer if you don't have egress, for example. They're just, the retail analysis and how retail works is super finicky. It's really, it's really tough because people just don't come. And so, and that's kind of proof for Park Place. They have struggled mightily there. And that is what we have to look at. And so to make, you know, maybe there's a concession there for some retail. Maybe, you know, a certain type of retail or something, or a certain type of office, or like an office medical component to it. Maybe that's part of it, perhaps. But I do think across the road, and I know there's a group that's proposing a small building there that would help retail. And they probably would do okay because they could have a standalone building and they could have a parking lot and people can walk from their, you know, 10 steps into that, whatever that shop is. For here, they have to park in back, they have to walk all the way around and then go in the front. And so it's just, there's just, whenever you create barriers for people for retail, it's really hard. It's just hard. It's hard. Because I mean, I want it, you know, just as much as anyone else does. It feels good. It feels like you're contributing to the whole spectrum of downtown and the services. And I think there's more capacity for redevelopment downtown than just this site. So that's my thought.
And I misheard you, and
Yeah,
I apologize because I thought you said restaurant and event center. And so
Yeah, yeah,
that
so
was
that-
my mistake, and
No, it's okay.
I misheard you.
Yeah.
I think one of the real challenges for retail is the fact that there's a state highway there, because we've had discussions with MnDOT. They're only going to allow the existing egress in at that one point. That's it. So it's not like we can put a curb cut closer up to the roundabout. It's going to cause bottlenecks. So you are always going to be left with what's the front, what's the back, how do you get in? You know, oh, I went by it already. Now I got to figure out how to get around. It's just the particular nature of the site that makes it difficult. But I will say that I think the retail, restaurant I include in retail, and the retail at the south end are in good spots, or in the best spots for this development. One is right at the roundabout in a very visible area close to the beach. You're gonna come into downtown, you're gonna see a brand new restaurant with outdoor seating there, probably a roof deck on top of that. And on the south end, we have a small 3,500 square foot retail with its own parking lot there. So we are putting the retail in where we think it can be successful. And that's all I had to say about that.
Kevin?
Just a comment. I think experience has showed me that just watching what has happened with Lighthouse Lofts and how many more people now go to Arts in the Park. With this, we're gonna create a lot more people down there. The more people we have downtown, that's gonna bring the retail.
Exactly.
So I like it only because I know that we have to have the residents down there first. And this is gonna help get more residents down there, like Lighthouse Lofts has done. And it's just gonna make it better for us as a city, I believe.
And two, the thing that I think rentals, I mean, they're choosing to rent, and that's a viable way to have your lifestyle. And that's been proven out, I mean, over and over and over and over again in many, many cases. And so these could be great homes. And so, yeah.
You know, I did want to comment, Dan, you might want to add in on this too. The comment about 2 and 3 and 4 bedroom units. Apartments these days are very expensive to build. I mean, the cost has gone crazy. And what I think the market has told developers, and the reason why you don't see a lot of 3 and 4 bedroom units, is it'd be very expensive. The unit sizes are directly correlate to what people can afford. And it's unfortunate, but people can only afford smaller apartments. If you did a 3 and 4 bedroom apartment, I don't know how much that would be. It would be,
I mean, you're 1,000 square feet, and so versus, I mean.
I'm hoping for 2 and 3.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There
So
is no 4 bedroom
Yeah, so there
To
will
my
be
knowledge,
some
there's no
to
four-bedroom in
So-
Forest Lake.
I don't know about that.
Lighthouse Loft.
What I think there will be other developments that will be townhome style. There'll be 2, 3 bedroom, and you will see for rent, single-family homes in this market, for sure. And there's going to be that. It's going to happen. It's just, this isn't the site to do that. And the other thing too is, however, as everyone is going here and going there, getting statistics and analytics and, talking about demographics and all this other kind of stuff, what was found out is that there's a large amount of millennials and a large amount of baby boomers, okay? And so those are the two groups. Well, those two groups don't have kids. They do, they're gone, and if the millennials aren't having them yet, they're pushing it to 30, 35. And so that's just a reality. And so we build to the largest demographics in the country, which is those two groups. And what's really important to have is a very pet-friendly project, and we have pet-friendly projects. That's really important because there's more dogs than kids, and that's a fact, and that's just what it is. And so there's lots of amenities around town, and to walk, and doggy play dates, and whatever you want to say. I mean, that's true, it's real. And so when we contemplate these things, we have to hit certain markets. And so it's not going to be the family orientated, with kids type of situations. And the other thing we didn't really talk much about, 1+s. And so in 1+s would be 1 plus a den. Well, that den is to people that work from home. And so those would be a part of the project too, because there's a lot of telecommunicators now and a lot of people that do work from home, and we understand that. And so we also too accommodate common areas for that too. If there's stations, for people to work at home, conference rooms for have people to work at home. It's just, sometimes you have to be flexible on what the market gives you at the time. So that's really what people want. They want a sense of affordability, and they're not, they don't want the basements. They don't want the Stairmasters and stuff. They don't need that stuff anymore. And so what they find out is that it's liberating just to kind of get rid of that stuff, rent for a while, and if they don't like to rent, and a big part of it is just active senior. It's the seniors, the baby boomers that they're maybe retired or near retirement, but they're not going to go over there to Applewood or Cherrywood or whatever it is. They want to be where the action's at, and they want to live a life that's active. And so that's what our projects are too.
I think it's a good point about working at home, especially for the millennials. And baby boomers too. I work at home. Is that you aren't going to have the kind of traffic, everybody leaving at 8 o'clock in the morning and everybody coming back at 5 o'clock at night. That's what it used to be in the old days. So I mean, that also affects parking. And what Dan said about 1+s, we design our spaces to be flexible. So if we have a 1+, that den, call it a den, will have a closet. That den may have a fold-out couch. If somebody wants to come stay, that's where they stay. They don't have a guest bedroom where it just sits there empty because people want to pay for the space that they use. And so, things have changed in that way.
Let me just clarify something. Early on, you mentioned you thought you were going to have about 60% studio in 1 bedroom, 40% 2 bedroom. So my simple math says it's about 42 bedroom units in that building. Is that,
Sure.
am I interpreting your numbers correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, again, ones can be 1+s, so they're not exactly 2s. Because, you don't really market a really small 1 bedroom that's really considered a den. You just say 1+.
Yeah.
And then you can use it as a 2, but it's not really marketed as that.
Right.
So the ones, 1+s, and then the alcove, Susan, just so you know, that is between a studio and a 1 bedroom. And the difference is that it has a wall in the sleeping area that goes 3/4 high because it doesn't have a window. It lets in light through the windowed wall.
So it's like
So it's not a
the
two-bedroom,
embassy,
it's a
it's like a hotel room.
Studios are like a 1 bedroom, or studios are like a
A hotel.
hotel room, and alcoves have a wall.
You have privacy.
Yeah,
Yeah, you actually have a wall.
yeah, with a slider door or
And it
something.
usually has a bathroom that's connected to it as well, which
Yep.
is like a Jack and Jill.
It's not a hotel, it's, they call them suites when you travel. You get a,
Sure.
you get the wall and it sort of separates the living room from the bedroom.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah, in that respect, yes, of course.
Thank you. Now I know what that is.
All right.
Susan?
Remembering my audience here and saying that you are, you're looking for the active folks, where are people going to store their boats and their water toys?
So we have a neighbor, Hallberg Marine, and I'm sure he'd be happy to have some more business.
But they can't put their boat in there.
Well, that's why you have to have a bigger marina downtown. That's why the third expansion's necessary.
Susan.
Brings more people downtown, right? Well, and that's still, these are life choices. It's Tim's Marina. Then that expand Tim's Marina. That's going to create opportunity for other people, for sure.
Chair Gerard, I think Commissioner Kubala has something else.
Okay, I have some questions. Is this, your plan going to accommodate electric vehicles?
Yes, we'll have EV stations.
Okay,
And that's going to be dependent upon, we won't put 50 in right away, but if it gets to that point incrementally, that's what we do all of our projects. We're incrementally adding them as folks ask for them.
okay, and then of the available outdoor parking, is any of that going to be assigned to residents or businesses, or is it all open?
Well, we can't.
It
because
is
it's
all,
municipal.
it'll all
Yeah.
be open because it's
Yeah.
all on public land.
And is there going to be any common areas for parking bicycles? And I heard talk about dogs, which I like, but I don't see a viable dog park or space to accommodate the broad number of dogs that something like this might bring in, especially if you allow it. And I think dogs function much better with space.
That's a great idea. So there's, imagine downtown Minneapolis, St. Paul, lots of dogs. And so there's lots of ways to accommodate a variety. There is spaces you create within your project, a dog run. And for your dog to, do its business, for example. That's probably the most common is a rooftop amenity that creates dog space up there.
I think it's really more normal, typical, that you don't really accommodate a space to walk your dog if you don't have the land to do it. If we have a doggy washing station, you'll come in at the parking level, there'll be a room there, and you walk your dog up the ramp and you can hose them off or her off. But the idea, they would be walking their dog out in the park here, out along the lakefront. That's where people would walk their dogs.
Is the current restriction no dogs in the park?
It's correct.
Yep.
That's correct. Dogs are not allowed in the park.
Oh, really?
So,
I can't drink
the-
there either, but,
The beach and the park, is it just the beach or is the park too?
I'm sorry?
The park and the beach?
I believe that whole area down there does not allow dogs.
We can definitely get to those regulations. I was not aware, but we can make sure that those
So-
regulations are part of the review.
Good question, anyhow. Yeah, we would have to think through that.
okay.
Other comments? I guess my parting comment is parking's very tight for public parking down there. And there's 100 and some spots back there that are currently public parking available, which you guys are parking obviously at the building next door during the daytime. Losing any of those public spots would be a crying shame, because we're already short a couple hundred spots in that area. And as I recall with Lighthouse Lofts, we originally had 30 public spots coming, but something happened at the end there, and I believe they were all turned over to Lighthouse Lofts, and the city didn't end up with any public parking, if I'm correct. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Are we referring to the parking to the north by the treatment plant?
Correct.
I'll have to look, but that's shared parking over there.
Yeah.
That's not exclusive to us, that shares easement. But you can look in records and correct me, but I'm almost 100% sure. Because we knew that the treatment plant area needed to have its own parking, but it's simply not used by city staff unless I mean, correct me if I'm wrong there too, but not very often.
Yeah,
Um,
originally it was gonna be overflow.
Yeah, and so,
Parking from the lake.
let me see here, Paul. So your other question was, so I think too, just to keep in mind that, I mean, we are taking away. I mean, we're taking buildings away, right? And so that if they were full, they're not. But if they were full, they would be using those spots. And so we're taking those away. And we are really trying to park all of the residential within the 2 levels of parking garage, which then leaves the nighttime use to the restaurant, daytime use, the plaza building. And so that, we still see that exchange there. So instead of having daytime use of the old bank and I'll just call it
Trade winds?
Tradewind Sports, plus you have ESIG, and plus you have the Marine Recruiter, and plus you have the little Asian cuisine, right? Those are all, potentially, they could be all open. And if you did 5 per 1,000, that's 300, that's like 300 stalls that you technically require. Like, for example, like out front here, City Center Commons, we're about 5 stalls per 1,000, okay? And that's typical. I mean, that's very typical in an office medical setting. So again, you go back to that same model and you put it down in the site, it doesn't really work. It doesn't really work to do an office medical redevelopment there without having a parking structure, which then just, it's not feasible. So we're taking the daytime use away, so I call it 3/4 of it, replacing it with a smaller daytime use, which is 5,000 square foot restaurant. Call it we'll just call it a bonus room of 2,000 feet, okay? Not 24,000, not multi-level stuff with multi-level bar areas, stuff like that. And so we really feel like there's a pretty even exchange going on here, what we're taking away.
When I drove through there today about 2:30 this afternoon, Lone Oaks parking lot, whatever, could have one just to the north of them. That only had a few cars in it, but pretty much all of the public parking, almost all the way down to the bank, was occupied. And those buildings, other buildings are empty. Tradewinds is empty, the bank's empty. Granted, there was parking way down at the end there by the bank, but the rest of it was pretty well filled. I was a little surprised it was that filled at 2:30 in the afternoon.
I wonder what it's like right now.
That's typical. Well, there'd be 40 stalls, 50 stalls now. I mean, that's fairly typical. So even when Tradewinds was going, the bank was going, Vanelli was up and running and having and Vanelli's was never really a factor because there was really exchanging of the guards. It really was kind of interesting because I would go and there'd be people driving in and it just would, and it happens. It really kind of happens. It's not just like anecdotal or something like daytime and nighttime. Okay, but I know what you're going to say, Susan, but again, remember what we're taking away. Just.
May
I
I?
tried to park for a Rotary meeting when it was at Vanelli's. I was four lanes back to the north.
Sure.
So you've heard it loud and clear tonight, the parking. There may be some retail on the front of that building. The rest, I think we're seem to be on page with redeveloping all this. What else do you want from us this evening?
If I might just, I would ask from a staff's perspective, there were a couple things that I did call out as variation that would be sought either through PUD or variance. One of them being the height of the building because it is a district that allows 4 stories. I do think that just getting a litmus test of the Planning Commission could give the developer a greater understanding if they should be moving forward or redesigning that aspect. Definitely I heard from this commission that parking is the concern. I didn't hear from a majority of the commission that street side, that ground level retail was desired. But I know from staff's perspective, those would be a couple things that I would ask maybe just to, maybe I'm not asking for votes right now, but really probably give that direction to the developer.
I mentioned the canyon feel. I think that 5 stories, it's coming down, it's gonna look like a canyon. Because you've got the large building here and a larger building over here. So I'm not comfortable with 5 stories. I'm probably very much the minority. I just remember that once the building on the north was up, folks were like, oh my God, we didn't realize it was going to be that big and that blocky. And looking at the Liffey and the Shakopee, it's not going to be, it's going to be fairly massive. It's not going to have it's going to be downtown urban.
Well, I think one aspect of it is don't underestimate, and renderings would tell a lot too and illustrate a lot, but the 2-story townhomes, that's where the eyes will go, because they'll feel like a stepped. And we can look at stepping it back from 61, the roundabout there. I mean, we can talk about how that can step back, and so it's not going to be as a canyon
Right.
feel.
I think that the main body of the building, which in the plan is in blue, would be 5-story, but the portion that would be at the restaurant would not be 5 stories. So it would step down at the critical juncture of, like you say, when you come in. So it'd feel like the 5-story was pushed back a little bit. You'd have the layered look of the 2-story townhomes, but we're not proposing to bring a 5-story building right up to that edge. So, I mean, it's all in the rendering and the design of, but we do want to do 5 stories because we've got to do a 2-story parking ramp. And it's hard to make it work with 2 stories of housing above that. But the idea would really be to make it something that would be a signature element that would help downtown and coming into downtown. That's the idea. So we certainly don't want to make it feel like a canyon in any way.
And you said you do expect that to be a 2-story patio. We're saying you were going to have
Yep.
something above the patio.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's the
so
idea.
restaurant main floor above it would be like a rooftop, like a Rudy's Red Eye, if you want to just get an illustration of that, something like that. That would have, that everyone can enjoy.
Stephen?
Well, I have talked with a few residents about this concept of these high buildings that are now blocking the view, and I'm very sensitive to that. However, I also think of the other side of the coin. When you're talking about the lake view, there was a time in Forest Lake when large houses were built on the lake and prevented the view from the people on the other side of the street who now can no longer see the lake because the house became quite large. And the other thing about it is that half of the people that are going to be living in this, because I'm assuming that there's going to be a hallway, one city side and one lake side, a lot more people are going to have access to that view daily that didn't used to have it and now can maybe afford at a smaller level to have the view that some of the large houses on the lake do have. So I think it's kind of a little bit about there's going to be a lot of people unhappy, but then there's also going to be some people that are happy. And I maybe tearing that up a little bit, I don't know, but there's people on both sides of this issue, and I'm not so sure which side I'm on yet.
That, those are great comments. I would say that, do you have a view now?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And there will be also, in addition to community rooms, there'll be some outdoor spaces that are common. So really, everybody's going to have a view of the lake, maybe not from their living room, but everybody will have the opportunity to enjoy the view of the lake from community common spaces.
I thought you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
No, I have no comment. I'm okay with the height of the building.
I have no problem with 5 stories, as long as Chief Newman's equipment goes and can service it, I have no problem.
Just for my 2 cents, I have no problem with the height of the building. I have no problem with all residential. I don't think the front needs to be retail. I think it'll invigorate the retail that's there that is not invigorated right now. So I think I like the way it lays out. Parking is a problem, exactly what Kevin said. That's my biggest concern in the whole thing.
Chair Gerard, I would say from a staff's perspective, I've gained enough, I think, from this workshop to be able to help continue to work with the developer going forward. I don't know if Dan and your team, John, if there's anything else you'd be seeking from the commission. But at least right now, I think that there's enough for staff to keep helping move you forward with this project.
Agreed. Thank you.
And, you know, feel free, this is a big project. We'd be more than happy to have you come before the planning commission again. We like to see development here, so it's really a matter of getting a working plan.
Yeah, no, and again, I can't stress enough, you know, the reason why I came here, we had the vision session with Lighthouse. We all know how that turned out, and just really value your, go ahead. I just really value your opinions and how you push back. It's good, healthy, and yeah, we welcome it.
Is Lighthouse fully leased?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
this
Good
evening.
night.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Bill Mars is the mayor shop.
The next item on the agenda is comprehensive plan code amendments. I'm not sure who's presenting on this.
I'll start it off, then I'm going to pass it over to City Planner Roberts. I had a college professor. His name was Kent Robertson. And now we have Ken Roberts here, and I have to stop every time I say it. So we all know. So I'm going to just pull up tonight, including the staff report, was just
Wait, Abby, before you start,
yeah.
the packet that I have on my machine does not have this on it. It only has,
Nope, this presentation.
no, it doesn't have the packet we got from you, from the city. I only have 12 pages here. I got the same package.
I only
We got
have
the same
12.
package.
Yeah, we'll have 12.
We don't have the amendments.
We don't have anything on the MXR1 in our packet on the screen.
Was that just because, was that a late, did I send that under separate cover? Okay.
That was emailed out to separately.
It was page 13, 14,
13 through 17.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just not on our computers.
Well,
Continue on, I
okay,
printed
we'll
half
check
of
it out.
Anyway, so.
We'll check it out. The staff report, I didn't necessarily plan on following the staff report. I apologize that maybe that's not there right now for you. I followed the
Sometimes I
format.
just reference it when I'm at the meeting, I want to see page so-and-so.
Okay.
Staff report.
Sure.
So, all right, I apologize for the interruption.
You're just fine. So we've been talking about 2040 comprehensive plan code changes to gain more consistency. We talked about the overarching goals a number of times, but specifically we've been honing in on those zoning code changes regarding the mixed residential district, that low density future residential future land use area. This commission also brought up the agricultural compatibility, complementary land uses, looking at different land uses that fit with these large lot agricultural areas. And then also there's been discussion of review of the Highway 61 corridor. I did note in here that is going to be its own separate planning study. The city is seeking additional funds to help fund that, and really looking at that from a redevelopment perspective along that 61 corridor and maybe even into that highway business area that the future land use plan calls for. So as a reminder, this commission's well aware, but for the folks that are watching from home, because I'm sure at this point we've got just tons of viewership, right? Low, medium density residential, it's estimated to be 60% of the total residential development that's going to be happening within Forest Lake and by 2040. That's all of the MXR1 district, and just to kind of, I know my big blockies versus my really nice Bolton and Mink maps, we don't have necessarily the best in-house technology, but a lot of areas that's south of the lake, west of Highway 61, and then there's some pocketed way up in the northwest corner of the city. So our existing MXR1 district lot standards, we talked about existing 15,000 square foot lots. We talked about townhomes, detached townhomes, the difference, 7,500. I think at your last meeting, and I apologize I was not able to be here just because of illness, but our proposed MXR1 district standards were presented to you of the lot area of 7,500 square feet. Lot was 65 feet. We talked about front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks, corners and rears. I did watch the video. I think this was something that overall there was consensus with moving forward with this. There was a little bit of discussion about that setback and whether or not there should be a setback of the house from behind the garage. I didn't highlight this in your staff report, but I highlighted this now because I don't know that the commission really had a whole lot of direction for staff, and forgive me again, I wasn't here, but whether or not that garage forward design was an issue or not. So I want to just stop there and talk just final feedback. I'm not looking for a huge discussion. We've had a lot of discussion. Just want to know if there's any final comments on this, if anybody did have any perspective on that garage forward or garage recess design. And otherwise, we'd move on to those agricultural compatible land uses.
Commissioners, questions? Well, if no one will start, I will. This garage, if it's up here in the yellow here, can you
Yep.
explain that a little closer?
The idea would be that this would restrict the garage forward design. I've heard from this commission at times that the garage forward design was of concern, essentially where you have your garage in front of your house. And this would then require the garage to be recessed from the front of the house. I've heard mixed things, and I just want to know whether or not this commission wants to move forward with promoting garage recess design. That's all.
I'm all for promoting it, but I did my homework per your request and drove through all of these developments, and they're virtually all garage forward developments.
They are.
And I have to commend the developers on many of these, the smaller, narrower lots, there's a lot of two-car garages. So if we have, what I'm gonna call streetscapes, I was very happy to see that. Some of them that squeezed in the three-car garage and just have a front door, not so excited about that. I don't think we get any streetscape, and I think you can take care of that. But I didn't mind the garage forward because, and I can't,
A lot of them have those nice porches on the front.
they have the nice, yeah, but I can't remember what development that was.
Here, I can pull up that development map.
Possibly Chestnut Creek. I know I walked them all. But yeah, I would agree. I like it. I don't mind the garage forward, especially when you get the landscaping in and it gets grown out a little bit.
Garage doors have come a long way too.
Yeah, you're right.
Great, then I will remove that by the time you see that ordinance come before you. That's the only thing that I had that I just wanted a clarification on. I know at the last meeting, there was the question of just a map. Let's look at some of these neighborhoods. Sounds like several of you did go through and walk them, and you're understanding what those patterns and fields would look like if we change the code regulations. Is there anything else that anyone wants to say, Susan?
I'm
Excuse
just
me, Commissioner
concerned
Young.
with the really huge amount, the very high percentage. We're looking at 60% of the city being that one type of housing,
I just want to clarify, I think it's 60% of the residential, that one type of housing.
percent of residential. And I think that is a lot, and fortunately, I don't have to live in those areas. It's just a lot of folks right next to each other. It doesn't provide a lot of housing variation. And so that is what it is. But I would like to, when we're looking at things with the ag, when we're looking at things with some of the commercial and the highway, thinking about making sure that there is some variety of housing in the city.
I don't have too much issue with all of this. I have two questions. I also missed the last meeting, but fortunately, I was not sick. I was on vacation. So how did we get down to 7,500 square foot? That seemed, when I was driving through, that was kind of small. Another 1,000 square feet would really make me happy to 8,500. And is the city, are you in agreement with Chief Newman that 7.5 is acceptable?
staff, I don't think Chief Newman necessarily supports the 7.5. However, staff did pull through, I think I included in your packet, the neighborhoods in which we have historically been approving 7,500 square foot lots. We have been approving 65-foot widths. We are approving 25-foot house setbacks. So it's not that this is based on just pulling it out of anything. It's that the neighborhoods that we're already approving these as per PUD.
I still don't have to necessarily be thrilled with it, because it's not all of the lots that are down at this size on these developments either.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of them that are quite a bit larger. So-
Yeah, that's just the minimum, setting that minimum.
The lots will be the minimums.
Well, in general, they will be.
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I might as well get in on the fun.
Absolutely.
These are the proposed minimums, and a developer may say, no, we need 7,800 or we need 8,000 because somebody wants that 3-car garage. There's nothing saying they can't go larger. Yes, they'll try to squeeze, but the market's really going to dictate. Maybe they want 70-foot wide lots instead of the 65. But what this does, it obviously reduces lot size, which in theory should reduce a little bit the housing costs because you have more units per acre or per development to spread out the development costs. So if we want to try to accommodate more housing at a little less price, the smaller lot size helps accomplish that.
I don't disagree.
Was it a year and a half ago that we had the developers in?
It was about that.
Yeah, and they were saying that if they could, to get these kind of lots, they could come all the way down to a $600,000, $700,000 home. So I guess that's what's affordable now.
I
It's
don't,
shocking.
I mean, with all due respect, we were just in a neighborhood meeting before this, a developer looking at 65-foot wide lots, and they were looking at about $400,000 price point. So
That would be great.
and even at 400 is still really expensive. I think all of us sitting around here can, if we own a home, think, wow, my first home wasn't that, my second home wasn't that. That they're still really expensive. That's what the market, unfortunately, for a variety of factors, is those are the price points of new construction right now.
And if I may, one other thing, my experience, my last city was Lake Elmo. They had a variety of lot sizes at all sorts and shapes and sizes, but the developers were telling us there were people that did not want a lot of large yard areas because they didn't want to maintain them. They didn't value the space that they would have to own and maintain. Some did, many didn't. They'd rather go to the park or they were going elsewhere because they didn't want to mow the grass and take care of those things.
Well, I think the one development I drove through, I believe down the 50-foot lots were detached townhomes. And they look very nice. I mean, they're small. Now 50, and I always have to put this in perspective. I was raised in Chicago on a 37.5-foot wide lot, which was a lot and a half, and my parents' neighbors, we had a big lot. And then my first house in St. Paul was on a 50. So to come up here and have, acreage, my family comes up there and go, wow, you are living the high life, So, but then I have Susan who's on, I don't know, 4,000 acres, so down by the swamp down there. We do get that collision, and this is the battlefield, right? Because now we're taking these farm fields and going from nobody per maybe 40 acres was one building, two buildings, and now we're gonna put in hundreds of houses, so it's just a little bit of a clash. So I'm okay with this, as long as we have something in there that says that if you're gonna have a narrow lot, you can't have a 3-car garage. I need some kind of presentation, some kind of streetscape, so I don't get 3 garage stalls and a door. The other thing I don't want, and I saw this only on a couple of houses, they really pushed the garage forward of the house. So I assume someone wanted an extra deep garage, and it had to be 22 feet at least. So it looked like almost the entire garage was in the front of the house. So I think you're on the right track with some of these distances and whatnot, and I think we just have to clean that up so we don't get sideswiped. And my last comment would be, to Susan's point, we have an awful lot of land now that is the MXR1. As we look at the comprehensive plan in a few years here, should it all remain MXR1 or should it go to something else?
It is definitely something, certainly, we've already started conversations with the Metropolitan Council about classifications for the next go-around of the comprehensive plan. It'll be probably 2025, I know it's not, that's 3 years out, that we'll start working with the Met Council, I'd say by 20, yeah, I mean, at 28, maybe even a little late, just depending on our comp plan and how the community grows. We will definitely be doing pretty strong between then and now, some pretty strong housing analysis to see what has been built, where has it been built, how has it been built, to be able to answer some of these questions of, are we oversaturated? I know Commissioner Young has brought that up before. We have lots of multifamily. How has that changed our density requirements? Those are things that I think the city definitely will be doing as we move forward.
And Paul, we just said that we're taking away the garage being 6 feet back behind the front line. So I just want to make sure, you just said you don't like the garage forward, but we just said that that's going to be okay. So I just wanted, I don't want coming up to a final vote and you saying, but I didn't want the garage forward. We just took out the yellow.
The garage forward, if it's got a porch next to it that fills up a lot of that space, so you don't really have the garage forward as much. Because, the porch isn't livable space, right? You sit out there and you have iced tea on Saturday afternoons or something. So it doesn't really look garage forward as such. But some of them, you have the front door and it's virtually 2/3 the length of a garage, sidewalk going up to it. So I'm looking for streetscape. However they get a streetscape, I'm happy.
I can look into it, and having worked in previous Washington County community, we called those snout houses, and they definitely were discouraged because we didn't want that overtly urban, non-pedestrian kind of feeling design. We can look into a few more design standards. I just want to double check though. Didn't sound like most people were in opposition to garages forward, but so much garage. Is that something we should be looking at? Is the commission in agreement with that? I mean, I'm happy to look it for you. I just want to know if everybody agrees with that. And then also you had said no 3-car. That one is hard. I don't know how we necessarily will restrict a 3rd car.
On a 50, on a 65, you can get a 3-car garage and still have what I would call a front room or something, right? Because you have, with a 7.5 on each side, you got a 50-foot building pad, which is what all these developers want, these magic 50 feet. So that gives you 32, let's say, 34 for the garage, and gives you 16 additional for the front door, and the den or whatever goes up here, the office that faces the street. So you have a streetscape. That's all I'm asking for, instead of 3 garage doors and a front door, and it looks like I'm getting my car repaired there.
Okay. We'll look into some additional standards to see what we might be able to do to accommodate greater streetscape design.
And I apologize for missing the last meeting and throwing a wrench in this if I'm doing that.
That's fine. I had thought that that was with the yellow highlighting there, the garage recessed is what I had thought was the intention in the past.
Oh, that would be great, but there's not one development I drove through that doesn't have garage forward.
Right, but what you're doing is you're setting the standard for the next ones.
I know.
So if that's what you're after, then.
So with this design, what you would have is you'd have your garage still in front of probably your house, but you'd have then a porch at least 6 feet deep, and usually those front lines are magically aligned. You'd have your porch and then you'd have your garage, very much the similar front. That's what
Kind of like
this
the
would
old
allow.
ranch houses, so it all lines up.
They don't always do right now. I will say this, they have quite a bit of architectural. Usually you've got a 3-footer, a 1-footer, and you've got that recessed design.
Some character.
We'll look at maybe some just creative
Character
design
would be nice.
standards. We'll probably have our meeting in November would be our last discussion. We're a little behind the schedule that I had anticipated. I think everything's been great so far. We'll talk a little bit about design standards, but I'm still hoping that we hold a hearing this year to make that recommendation to the council for their consideration in January. On this portion, I think even moving forward with our agricultural
So,
compatible,
Before we start, any
Yeah.
last comments for staff?
any last
on-
comments? for
I just
staff?
have a question on this, the way it's written on setback front and, you know, the garage sits forward, so you're setback from the road to the garage. Wouldn't that be the 25 feet and the house be the 30 feet setback? Why am I seeing that wrong?
So your house would be allowed to be 25
Oh,
feet
it's-
from the property line. The garage would have to be 30 feet from the property line. So this encourages that garage behind the front line of the house.
And we've decided we're not going with that.
That's what I'm hearing, is that
Okay,
you
well,
don't
so-
care
but I
about
only
that garage.
I only see certain words in yellow, yet 25 foot and 30 foot are not in yellow. And we're saying we're getting rid of the yellow.
Well, no,
Get rid of all of it.
we'll,
We're getting rid of the whole thing.
we'll
The whole
come
thing
back
should
with
be
new
yellow, but it's
setback.
got- okay,
We'll
good.
come back
That's
with
what I
new
wanted
setback
to be clear.
design standards.
Okay, thank you.
A work in progress.
Any other comments on this topic? Otherwise, Abby will move forward to the next one.
This is the fun one, guys. I'm gonna actually hand it over to Ken, so he can kind of chat some with you about agricultural compatible land uses.
So my understanding is with the rural or agricultural areas, are there things the city can do in the ordinance to make those areas more viable, more, well, even livable, and increase the, not, and be able to resist the development pressures? There will not be urban services probably for a lot of the city ever, and certainly a lot won't happen until after 2030. So these areas are going to remain in their state without services for the foreseeable future. So we're looking, can we create a rural buffer area, provide alternative land uses on these 10, 20, 40 acre larger parcels, and increase the opportunities for agricultural tourism. And these are the examples that we're aware of that have been done in other areas of Washington County and Chisago County, wineries and distilleries and breweries, event centers, you know, having the wedding in a barn has been a thing for a while. I don't know if it still is. Apple orchards and bed and breakfasts. You have specialty animal clinics, probably for large animals with horses or llamas or whatever, and then you have the training facility on a site. Of course, greenhouses and nurseries always fit into the rural landscape. Commercial recreation could fit in some ways with campgrounds, golf courses, hunting clubs. Religious uses are, I've seen that in other places where maybe you have a church, but then they want space, and then they have outdoor meeting areas. One that's not on here that happens are cemeteries. They're not real exciting, but they're quiet. They have wild parties. And then with that, accessory dwelling units, that was really more of what we wanted to focus on this evening. We've started looking into that. We allow those now in the single-family homes attached to the primary home. Accessory dwelling units are independent from the main residential unit, or could be. So a standalone, smaller, essentially a small house, small apartment unit on the same property. And looking at the comprehensive plan objectives, how ADUs, I'm going to use that term for short, how that fits in. We're supposed to review regulations to allow compatible secondary uses where agriculture is predominant land use. And then in the housing chapter, it refers to allowing development of separate accessory units where appropriate. And of course, the where appropriate is the big kicker. So we've started reviewing some other ordinances that we have researched, and Abby and I have talked about where might these fit and under what circumstances? So for our focus tonight, we're looking at the agricultural and rural residential areas, again, the large acreage properties. Maybe eventually get into the single-family neighborhoods, but not for now. We're proposing that if we go down this road, that there could be one additional unit, one ADU on a property. We don't foresee a village of 4, 5, 6 ADUs around a single-family home.
That was going to be my question.
No, the way we're going right now is one per property. And with that, the ADU could not be split off from the property and create a separate tax parcel. It'd all have to be one property. And they'll have to have some kind of a connection to the primary residence. We would expect it would be, again, the rural area sharing the well, sharing a septic system. Again, cannot be subdivided. Electrical service, maybe there'd be a separate service, maybe not, those kind of things. It would have to meet all the primary residential setbacks, so we don't foresee or would not want an ADU, say, in a front yard. Now, maybe, again, I'm thinking there's a 40-acre parcel and the main house is 500 feet off the road. Could an ADU be between the road and that house? Well, maybe. But the idea is to have it in a backyard primarily. We would look at maximum square footage, either by the size, a comparison to the size of the primary house. So if the house is, say, 1,500 square feet, maybe the ADU can't be more than 1,000, as an example. We look at a maximum number of bedrooms, maybe, again, to help limit the size, maybe a maximum of 2 bedrooms. And I talked about the percentage. We would really encourage that the materials and the finish be similar to, or certainly complement, if you will, the primary residence, and that it be owner occupied and not for, well, our attention is not for commercial, not primarily for commercial or rental use. Now, could someone have an ADU and then rent it out? We don't have rental housing licensing in Forest Lake. I don't think we're gonna go there anytime soon. So that's something to think about. And of course, it would have to meet all building code standards. It'd have to be on a foundation. We might limit the number of occupants, but that gets into square footage, although we talk about that, well, okay, if we say you can only have 4 people in there and somebody has 6, we don't have the occupancy police to go out and knock on doors and check bedrooms. So that's a nice standard to talk about, but enforcement is impossible. Again, it can't be subdivided, share utilities. The goal is to have the property, in my mind, to have the property owner live either in the primary house or in the ADU, not have both rented at the same time. And so that's kind of the overall theme of ADUs. And I guess what we're looking for tonight is some direction. Do you like the concept? Should we keep developing an ordinance further based on some of these things? Are there things you don't like? And we're looking for direction.
Commissioners? Geneva?
Okay, so just because I'm kind of new and this might be a silly question, but under the current code for agricultural uses, none of this plan is something that somebody could do on their agricultural property right now, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Then the additional units, let's just say I have enough acres and I want to have some horses and I board horses and I want to have people come in and ride horses. Under what I'm seeing under other miscellaneous standards, they couldn't rent that unit out for like a B&B horseback riding weekend with their family?
This is not intended for short-term rentals.
Okay. And
Now, if we want to go down that route, and then that's a whole different thing. It's our vision, at least myself, is for long-term. The grandkids want to come live with grandma and grandpa, or it's the other way around. The family's there and they want to bring grandma and grandpa to the property, have them close, but not too close. So they stay in the ADU. Or if maybe it's a college kid that wants to come live with you for a year. Not so on long term, more than a month at a time, maybe 6 months or a year. But could somebody have one and do it on a weekly basis? Again, we're not in the rental housing licensing and limiting. And if we said that's not allowed and then try to enforce it, again, we don't have the staff or the resources to monitor every one that would be happening. That's not our primary goal here. The primary goal is to provide other alternative long-term housing options.
Susan?
I think as they pointed out tonight, that there is already a very significant amount of rented single-family homes in the city and rented townhomes in the city. So we are in the rental housing business. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we just are. I'm wondering about if one of your early slides was ag tourism. And so we do have some really great opportunities with Big Marine Lake and with the state park. And Big Marine is going to be much larger. I think that the opportunity to have some ag or recreational tourism is a good thing, and maybe having an ADU that could be rented as a Airbnb or that sort of thing. I can see that being available on these properties. I like the idea of it being small. I like the idea of these being, percentage, all those things. But I think that I would rather not preclude the opportunity to have Airbnb or a regular B&B or that sort of thing on these properties. So that's, I don't want, I need to think about how we would handle it, but I think that with people wanting to make better recreational use of the lake or to work up with the Harbor Creek Trail, being able to do day trips to Taylor's Falls and Chisago and things like that. There are some opportunities there for that kind of short-term rental. One of the things that is becoming more and more important is being able to access a community garden or a rental ag land. And State Department of Ag is working really hard to get some of those opportunities. Forest Lake is in a good location for that. Is this something that we are wanting to either encourage or discourage? I can think of 3 or 4 properties that are being used that way, where it's a piece of ground and somebody from St. Paul is coming up 2 or 3 evenings and weekends and
In the land.
yeah, well,
And then-
I call it truck farming. All
Yep.
right, that's what we did.
And then they're going to and selling at the farmer's markets.
Yeah. Is that something that I would hope we wouldn't be prohibiting that, but I think that what that has happened in some places is that because there weren't any sort of rules around it requiring porta potty, requiring whatever screen, that there were some conflicts that happened. Whereas if this was something that we said, yes, as we value our ag land and this is a possibility, we want to make provisions so that this can happen and minimize the conflicts.
Well, as I understand the zoning code right now, there's nothing prohibiting someone from leasing out 1-acre plots or 2-acre plots to other farmers. You're right, though, then the question becomes, where do they store their tools? Do they need a porta potty? Where do they park when they come to work? What hours are they working the land? Those kind of things. Do we want to try to regulate that? If we're not getting any complaints, I don't see the need. If it suddenly becomes a big issue, yeah, then maybe we need to start policing it. But there's nothing right now saying farmer A can't rent to farmer B, C, and D in smaller sections of their property.
And I'd like to just point out that the start of this conversation really is about accessory dwellings, and that's okay. We had previously gone through just this kind of list that we talked about, complementary land uses. And at the time when we talked about it, it's been a couple months now, these were the ones that I think the commissions, because I said, we really can't focus on all of these at once, right? Standards for them all. And so the commission had said, well, wineries, distilleries, breweries, wedding venues, those are kind of big ones that are happening in rural areas, and accessory dwellings units were brought up. So that's why we kind of started on the accessory dwelling unit, and then kind of working into that winery, brewery, event center. I have a note here about truck farming. I wasn't familiar. I mean, I understand it now. I know what you're referring to. It's certainly something that we'll put on this list as how that integrates in some of these future conversations about land use changes in the agricultural district.
I think that one of our opportunities as we're looking at the ways that we're using ag districts is the wedding venues have been, I'm thinking Grant Township, where because there weren't frameworks.
Yep.
It became a challenge.
Yep.
And so what I'd like to do is, as long as we're talking about ag uses, can we think about things before they become a problem and before we start to get complaints?
The very next slide is going to focus just on that. So just right now, we're just kind of looking at accessory dwelling units and really seeing, generally speaking, is the commission favorable to some of the established standards here, including, 1 per unit, connection to the primary residence, meeting primary setbacks, smaller than primary structure. Those are kind of the things. I think the only thing I've heard maybe is that there is a desire potentially to allow these for rental use because they can help support the agricultural tourism in the community.
Well, I'm actually in favor of all of this, but I think you're going to have to allow some rental use. It's just, the market is saying people want to go places for a short period of time, maybe it's 30 days, and go enjoy that area for an extended vacation. And, I don't see why you wouldn't want to. I can't see a downside.
Sure.
And that's why we're having this conversation.
Right.
But am I hearing there's a general consensus of what's on the screen is a good starting point?
I have no problem. Kevin?
No, I disagree. So I usually love housing, and I am pro housing for the most part. But a few years ago, when accessory dwelling units really came to life, they came about because healthcare costs were so high for people to go into care facilities that people wanted to care for their loved ones at home. That went away really quickly because people passed away, and people found that they couldn't handle them at home, and they put them into care facilities anyways, and then they started renting these properties out. That causes a whole nother issue. It causes issues with enforcement. It causes issues in terms of, we have people in our community currently that live in motorhomes and live in campers in backyards, and we don't stop it. This will go down the same path. And what happens a lot of times is when you get into residential neighborhoods with accessory dwelling units, people rent those out. They have leases with these people. Then they want to sell their houses. So they can sell their houses, but they've got a lease with the person in their accessory dwelling unit that has to stay because they have rights once they're in that property. So I am not in favor of accessory dwelling units, and I don't think we should go down that path. A lot of the communities that I work in are trying to now go back and change that. So that's just my opinion. I loved the concept originally, but as we've now had these around for a few years, I don't like the concept anymore. And it usually turns into VRBOs, they usually turn into Airbnbs. And you have neighbors complaining because there's parties going on, and there's all this other stuff that happened in the backyards of these people's houses. And I know we're only talking about agricultural at this point, but I'm guessing if we go agricultural, then there's gonna be requests for in the city. So my opinion is, this is a path we shouldn't go down as a city, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Comments on, you're good?
I'm good. If it stays agricultural and big as was discussed here, I'm okay with that. I absolutely understand what he's talking about. I lived in Hawaii for 5 years. They have what they call Ohana units. They started back in the 80s, and it became that exact problem. Huge problem, because it just doubled the number of units, and everybody was renting out, building separate units on their small house plot that they had already. So, I mean, if we're talking agricultural and on a large scale, I think it's fine, but yeah, it's a.
I think initially, what we had just talked about was a eligibility of 5 acres or greater. You know, that serves as a pretty good buffer distance from your other neighbors. That's why we said agricultural and maybe the rural residential district. Certainly can keep it exclusively to agricultural. I can respect Commissioner Miller's concerns. I worked in a community that very much supported accessory dwelling units. I know some of the challenges that communities can face with them. Certainly too, as you do see the rise of things like agricultural tourism and potential VRBOs. I think that's one of the reasons why things like owner occupancy, the city would, staff has discussed requiring an owner to be there on site so that reduces some of those conflicts. We'll keep flushing through this and bring something kind of back that maybe really aligns with most of the commission's, desires.
Something called Harvest House, it's a network of the ag tourism places across the nation. And maybe looking at the way some of those are set up in various places. It's, being able to spend a night at a winery as you're traveling across the country. But Harvest House is one of those.
Great.
Those options.
Thanks.
I like go ahead, Susan.
And I can see the challenge of anything in a residential, mixed residential, or MXR, even some of our residential estate. I can see that. I can see where that could be a real problem.
Yeah, when we first started kind of just throwing out some ideas in terms of standards, it was brought up, why not, maybe the older part of town? Those are areas that are typically dense. Why wouldn't we maybe allow that? And that's really common, especially in older communities, to another way to try to achieve density. Sometimes the more you put people in littler lots, littler land areas, that can cause problems. And so that is something that, and the comp plan didn't really call for that. It really did call for the inclusion in those agricultural areas. So start small, see how it works. But we'll keep moving forward. We'll bring something back with you that's a little bit more refined.
I'm willing to give, I appreciate that we're only looking at this as a couple areas, to Kevin's point. The last thing we need is another new set of problems in this town that we can't enforce. I do have a little concern with the shared utilities, since these are all going to be on septics. I can't imagine any of it's in the MUSA, but it's possible. What are the odds of that septic currently as its size being able to accommodate another bedroom?
Pretty small. They'd probably have to upgrade their septics.
They would have to upgrade their septic versus putting a second septic in.
Right.
Okay.
And the well too, is there
Could be,
enough
yeah.
well water, and what's the capacity of the well? And I envision, as people start looking at these and they start getting into the building code, they're not going to be $20,000 or $30,000 structures.
No.
Yeah.
But when you do all these things, it could easily be $100,000 to build one of these. Well, the cash flow of that, if you're trying to really make a living out of it, that's going to be impossible. But if it's for grandma and grandpa or the kids to stay, some people are willing to invest that as for their long-term use of that property.
Any final comments on the ADU part of the discussion this evening? Or does staff have any other questions they need answers before?
I don't, not right now, I'm
Nope.
not on this.
Okay.
Thank you. And lastly, it's a mouthful: winery, distillery, brewery, restaurant, and/or event wedding venues. Maybe we'll do an acronym for this by the end of it, right? The idea being a little bit more intense commercial uses. But these are the ones that we're starting to really see in some of these agricultural areas and agricultural tourism. I think we're all probably really commonly familiar with the event wedding venue in a barn, right? But brew farms, distillery farms, wineries, these are not uncommon things in the agricultural areas. So just a high level, there's different types of review and permitting. Some uses in our code are outright permitted. We might have standards associated with them, but if they wanted to just go start planting a bunch of vines for a winery, they wouldn't necessarily need our review. Some need site plan review. Site plan review, you should be familiar with. Most commonly, it's McDonald's is changing their drive-through or their building or whatnot. But we can require a site plan review for those uses that are outright permitted so that we have some sort of review and more discretion on how things are laid out. And then we also do things by conditional use permit. So conditional use permit is a review process in which the city holds a public hearing. We issue a permit, conditions may be attached. The code is already really specific that when we're looking at conditional use permits, we'd look at the impact on the health, safety, welfare of the general community, traffic conditions, parking facilities, use on public facilities or utilities, property values, scenic views, comprehensive plan consistency, zoning code consistency, whether or not market feasibility, and the effects on any sort of natural resources. So the first thing that staff would like to at least just note is that we would probably require or recommend that a conditional use permit be required for these. Now that being said, you can achieve some of the exact same things you'd look at by conditional use permit through the site plan review process. It's just if these types of uses did become unruly, there was a noise issue, it was greatly impacting the neighborhood. Outright permitted uses, they generally are a lot harder to enforce. Whereas a conditional use permit, you kind of have that permit as the offering to the property owner, business owner. And if there becomes nuisance issues, you do have the ability to, through due process, consider revocation of that permit. So what staff would recommend is that should we move down these routes, we would look at some sort of conditional use permit, but we wanted to just hear some considerations of other potential standards for these types of uses. Things like hours of operation, noise and light buffering, access and parking requirements. And maybe all of this is really high level in the word acronym, lots of uses category here, but off the cuff, wanted to just kind of gauge some initial, throw some things out there for us to start kind of looking into a little bit more. Or if we're not there yet, just say, you know what, let's just start with ADUs and talk about this one later.
Kevin?
My question would be, are these going to be separate units on standalone properties? Or are they going to be things that can be added to current properties that already have households on them, like an accessory dwelling unit?
The comp plan says explore these as accessory uses to properties, that you would have owner occupied presence.
The place on 97 on the north side of the road between Highway 15 and Scandia, they have their residents there, but they're also developing it as a winery and event center. Rustic Roots over in Scandia, that is no residential, that is just a straight winery. If we are wanting to preserve some valuable either ag land or wetland combination, wetland ag areas as in Forest Lake, these may be ways of allowing a property owner to actually do that without having won the lottery recently.
No, I understand. So let's just use an example. If we had a 10,000 square foot house on 40 acres, they could build if we approve the accessory dwelling unit concept, they could build a facility that's 75% of that on that property as an accessory dwelling unit. It's just hypothetically.
Although we did also talk about just the idea of 75% or 1,000 square feet, you know,
Okay,
still,
so we could limit the
we,
size.
we could limit
So
the
they
size
couldn't
too.
use that accessory dwelling unit as one of these items. These
No,
would come to us as a separate item,
yes,
and they then potentially could build it bigger if we approved it.
If the city had set a bunch of standards, like those on the screen.
Yep.
And they could show they're meeting setbacks, there's enough parking, all these kind of things that would be looked at. Yes. So let's say you have a house of any size on 40 acres, and now you want to have a wedding venue.
Yeah.
So now you want to put up a big barn. Well, thered be no size limit on the barn, and there'd be building code standards and fire code standards and bathroom standards that they would meet. But if it could be shown there's enough parking, what hours of operation, they won't causing a disturbance, then if those are the standards that are put in place, then the city should approve it. But there'd be a lot of standards any of these would have to meet before they could get approved, especially if it's under a conditional use permit. If it's just a outright permitted, you can put up a barn and have a wedding venue. I don't think the city wants to do that. I think the city wants to have some review and control. And you may even get into, you can only have one of these type of uses every half mile or mile. So you don't have 3 in a row, say.
Yeah, no, I totally love the concept, but, so they would have to have potentially their own separate wells, their own septic, their own separate septic systems, their own facilities potentially. But they could potentially build a wine haven, for example.
correct. I mean, this would essentially allow for those agricultural properties, and maybe we have some size restrictions. We only would allow it on 10 acres or greater. You know, those properties that, you know, we're starting to see the development pressure coming in, you know, that they're considering, oh, do I sell to a developer or do I sell to keep natural resource or construct or build or whatever it is. It's just allowing for greater options for our property owners.
Because currently our acreage allows only so many houses per acre.
Yep, yep.
I really like the staff recommendation of conditional use permits instead of site plan review and outright permitting. I think I think the conditional use recommendation that you made, I really think that's the way to go.
Yeah, we would agree. I think, you know, we'll probably take this and tease this apart a little bit. Maybe it is a certain type of use, agricultural related production, you know, event, you know, maybe we can lump it all into one and develop some standards. I'm not sure. I assume this commission would be curious about hours of operation, noise and light buffering, access and parking requirements. We'll start to kind of look to see how other communities really are teasing some of those things out, or if they're just looking at it through that use permit process and saying, well, you know, Joe, you're a half mile from anybody and everything's going to be indoors and you're done by 10 o'clock. This, you know, here's a use permit with some conditions. I don't think it'll be that circumstance, but we'll look at some of those options and kind of bring something back. I think this will probably trail a little bit behind MXR1, but just because when I started with MXR1, there was a big question of why are we focusing on this and not some of this agricultural stuff? And it's rightly so. We have much more agricultural, large lot, rural residential that some of this could apply to.
I have a question.
Sure.
Does the person who's going to have this on their property have to be the owner operator of the property, or can they rent out that space to somebody else?
I don't think that we had even thought that far. The city doesn't have any rental restrictions within the community. Personally, and our comp plan does call for maybe a rental licensing or registration program in the future, really to start to look at, you know, apartments and how that's working. When it comes to renting out land, renting a business, that starts to get into an area that I don't know that we'd want to get into too much.
So then somebody could, like, kind of say, you use my property for this, I'll allow it if the city allows it, and
Yeah.
go ahead and do what you do.
Yeah.
I have no problem with any of this. My only concern is, we have a number of roads in Forest Lake that are not paved. And I just want to make sure that I don't have wedding venue A with 100 cars coming down a dirt road. And it's going to aggravate all the neighbors on the way down there. So I'd like that looked at just to see where.
Sure.
Because we get that all the time. How much dust are we going to get from this new housing development or something? And we are, like I said, we already have plenty of problems. We don't need to create any.
Nope, we want to create opportunities. Well, we have enough direction at least to kind of keep moving forward, keep this commission's desire, the comp plan, code amendments, conversations moving forward. We'll bring some more stuff back for you at a later date.
What else do you have in this topic?
Nothing else. That is all we have tonight for you.
All right, well, thank you very much. We'll move to the other section of our agenda. Do we have Councilperson Munson on tonight? Okay, then we'll start with Abby. Anything you'd like to tell us about that we should know?
Just a couple quick updates. The Met Council did update system statements, so they made changes to their transportation policy and their regional parks policy plan. We received notice from them that they then in effect affected our comprehensive plan and that there may end up needing to be changes to our comprehensive plan. We've reviewed them. They're very minor changes. One has to do with their removal of the I-35 interchange from their regional transportation system plan or something. It was like a pretty old update. It didn't affect us. And then the other one with the parks plan was, it was more of just a policy-based thing that didn't affect the city's parks plan at all. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to just be providing comment to the Met Council that we don't intend to update our comp plan on that. Yes.
When you talk to the Met Council regarding transportation planning, would it be possible to request that Forest Lake be removed from the transit taxing district?
That is a very interesting inquiry. I have recently talked with other Washington County staff in the that have heard very similarly throughout the county the concern of being in the taxing district but not necessarily having that benefit. There has been encouragement for the city to write officially to the Met Council stating that a position. That isn't something, I mean, this was like a yesterday conversation, and I know that that's been brought up to staff or brought up in meetings in the past, the concern of being in the taxing district. So it was something that I was planning to move forward with city administration to talk about how we do that in a way that's appropriate for Forest Lake. So.
Full disclosure, I was on the council and was a very strong proponent of bringing us into that because the promise was that we would have transit for Forest Lake residents to get to and from jobs in the first ring and cities. And it is my understanding that now that it has been removed from Forest Lake and from Columbus, that they will not be bringing it back in the next 10 years.
And that is something that I'm still trying to understand. My understanding is that Forest Lake did have at our transit center about a 70% vehicle occupancy rate at various times of the day. It was very heavily used. And so how we go about engaging with, the county and the Met Council and, all of the powers that be to say, this is something our community has been lacking, and how to engage in that conversation is something that we want to be pretty strategic about. But yes, I understand your concerns, Commissioner Young, and the concerns of many of our citizens that are concerned about being in a taxing district without having that public benefit traditionally associated with it. The only other one that I wanted to have, if you had not already heard, next Tuesday night at 4 o'clock, right here at City Center. City Center, is that what they call it? City Hall? 4 to 6, there's an open house on the Highway 97 project. So that's Highway 97 from Highway 61 to the interstate. So it's a MnDOT-led project. I think they'll probably be here about a little early, maybe 3:30. If you ended up, you couldn't be here, you know, before 4 or something. But if you hadn't already received that notice, that's here at City Hall.
November 1st.
November 1st, yes.
And am I right, the plan is to reconstruct that in 2025?
Yep.
Is there a way that we could beg them to be a little later so that folks that don't typically get home until 6:30?
It actually starts at 4 o'clock. They're coming early to set up, so they're available to answer any questions for anybody that comes early, but they'll be here from 4 to 6.
And I think the concern was just at those folks later than 6. I do know that they are also going to be doing online public engagement, and I think they may also be doing an online public open house. I heard that those are great attendance rates. Being a little facetious there, but I think that the 4 to 6 was the theory being we'd be available.
Actually, I've held those online, Ideville Road, Robert Street, Summit Avenue. I've held those, and depending on your population, if they are folks that tend to do the computer thing, yeah, they can be effective, but I'm not sure that is a Forest Lake thing. It would be really nice if they could have it in person until 6:30.
Well, you know what? I will tell you this. I will be here. I can make the commitment to maybe just casually chit chat with them for a little while, right? If you show up a little late and the doors are open, please come on in.
They may have another one down the road.
Yes, I don't know the full extent of their public engagement, but we'll keep you guys posted on anything that's coming up.
This is an open house as to how they're changing it?
Yes,
It's already
correct.
been decided and this is what they're doing?
No,
plans
it
drawn
hasn't
out?
been decided.
They're
They're still
looking for feedback on it.
Yep, they're looking for feedback on their preliminary designs. We have been working, city staff has been working with MnDOT on this design for quite a while now. They did go to the city council at their last meeting. It was a workshop to get council feedback. I think there's a lot of things in there that definitely improve the corridor, greater pedestrian access, the opportunity for looking for reduced speeds through there. But I think I'm encouraging everyone in the community to come out and take a look, because it's going to change the character of that roadway. And hopefully be safer. That is all I have, unless there's any members of the commission that have any questions for me.
And we'll only have one meeting in November
That
and one
is-
in December.
That is correct. In November, you will be meeting November 9th, and in December, you'll be meeting December 14th.
We definitely have at least 2 items for the 9th and potentially 4 or 5 items, public hearings for the 14th.
We have a preview of coming attractions?
Well, we'll be talking about MX1, R1.
The one public hearing I know for the 9th is a setback variance for a septic system. Lighting thing.
The 9th, yeah, the 9th is still pretty light. December's meeting, we've got you have a public hearing on Shadow Creek as well on the 9th. So Shadow Creek Estates, that is a planned unit development, mixed residential, right at the Shadow Creek stable site. Some of you might be very familiar with the half dozen concept plans you reviewed for that project. December, though, there's quite a number and a lot of site plan review, but really one site plan review that's come in, it's from Forest Lake Ford. They've purchased a property along the interstate, and then, or near the interstate, I guess.
And that's to build a brand new dealership. It's tearing down an old building.
Then the rest of them, our application submittal deadline isn't for a couple more weeks, so we haven't had any formal submittals yet.
We've been working with, 3 or 4 other developers, giving preliminary comments and sending them back and say, we need this, we need this. And if they get all their requirements met and get them in on time, then some are slower than others to respond, so we'll see.
Ken, do you have anything to add tonight?
No, it's been a pleasure. Good meeting, first meeting, and not scared away yet.
Very good. Well, welcome aboard. Karen?
I have no comments.
Geneva?
I don't know if this is an appropriate forum for this, however, you guys will direct me if it's not. Since Mike was a big part of the Planning Commission for many, many years, and we have a really nice setting here, I was wondering if there's a way to get a bench on this property in honor of his service to the Planning Commission and the city of Forest Lake, and have it right out here someplace in the city in his honor.
Fire department, I mean, he was a big piece of the fire department too. That's a nice idea.
It's a nice idea. Should we turn that over to Abby to look into?
I will look into that. I'll let you know that as part of the other efforts that I've been working on is one is revisiting the city's bench dedication program. Currently, right now, the past practice kind of has been anybody who would like to buy a plaque can give it to the city and they would install it on a taxpayer purchased bench. Now a lot of those benches are in need of replacement and we don't have replacement costs, so we're looking at a sustainable program where folks purchase a bench. Now that being said, knowing Mike's contributions, not just to the commission, but to the fire department, I'll talk with Chief Newman to see if there is something that maybe the Fire Relief Association in the city might be able to do, but I'll look into that and I'll get back to you. Yep.
And Abby, the Legion might want to go in on that too, because he was a post commander.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for letting me know that.
Evan?
Nothing.
Don? Susan? I have one for Karen.
Oh,
Okay.
I got an email yesterday, I think it was yesterday, from, I got it here, BSNA, looking for me to sign up for my email for the city of Forest Lake. I haven't clicked on this email because I already got an email address. It said, well, when you do set this up, then we'll delete blah, blah, blah.
I got the same email, but I deleted it.
From BSNA.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah,
I can take a screenshot of it.
yeah, I would say just probably
We're all good. If we've signed up,
that. I'm not sure
Yeah.
why
If you're getting
BSA
email,
is sending that
then-
to you. Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
I'd be more worried about it being compromised, something.
So BSNA is an actual platform that we use here. So we use it for building permitting, accounts payable, general ledger. We do also use it for timesheets. And so if in some way your emails may have gotten associated with that, you can, for payment?
You get paid.
No.
You get paid, so they may be wanting to
Let
set
me
up in the
talk
payroll
with HR. Well, we can talk with HR, but I would,
Odd, but
yeah, it does seem odd to,
I thought it was odd when I got it, but
we'll look into it and get back in touch with you.
I'm looking for it here, and of course I can't find it.
That's all right. You can forward it to me when you find it later tonight.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I have nothing else, and since no one else has anything else, the chair is looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. It's a non-debatable motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all for your service this evening. Have a pleasant week. I didn't get